The string quartet played something cheerful, but all I could hear was the steady thump of my pulse against my silk blouse. I stood near the cake, 3 tiers of fondant perfection, smiling at a room full of cousins, uncles, and neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in years except through carefully worded holiday cards. It was Grandpa's 92nd birthday, or so they said. The chandeliers above us cast a golden glow over the banquet hall, catching in the sequins of my mother's gown as she raised her glass for another toast. I adjusted the pearl earring that felt too heavy on my ear and kept my smile poised, the way a daughter was expected to. That's when my husband leaned in. His hand brushed the small of my back, steady, grounding, and his whisper cut through the noise like glass shattering on tile. "They forged this entire party," he said softly, lips barely moving. "He's long gone." For a second, I thought I misheard. My smile didn't falter, though inside, the floor seemed to give way beneath my heels. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute. The applause swelled. Someone laughed too loudly. From across the room, my mother caught my eye and nodded, as though daring me to enjoy this theater she'd orchestrated. I let the bubbles slide down my throat, bitter and sharp, while the truth lodged like a stone in my chest. If Grandpa wasn't here, if he hadn't been for some time, then what was this gathering but a stage, and all of us unwilling actors? And why had I been the last to know? Long before the glittering banquet halls and polished champagne flutes, there was a smaller house on Maple Street, where Grandpa used to sit on the porch swing with me every evening. I was 15 when I first noticed the change, the way his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his coffee mug, how he forgot the name of my best friend, or how he sometimes called me Eleanor, which was my mother's name, not mine. "Grandpa," I whispered one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the porch, "are you okay?" He smiled, that slow, wrinkled grin that always made me feel safe. "Of course, sweetheart. Don't let the small things worry you." But I saw it, the flicker of confusion in his eyes. I carried that worry into the kitchen one night, when the grown-ups were gathered around the table. My voice was quiet but urgent. "I think Grandpa's memory is slipping. He forgot where he left his wallet and—" My mother cut me off with a sharp look, her manicured hand slicing through the air. "Claire, enough. Don't dramatize. He's fine." "But—" My uncle chuckled, pouring himself another glass of bourbon. "Teenagers always need a crisis. Let the doctors decide, not your imagination." The lump rose in my throat so quickly I could barely breathe. My palms dampened, my heart racing, yet no one met my eyes. I wanted to scream, but instead, I swallowed the sting of humiliation. Later that night, Grandpa found me in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, hot tears slipping down my cheeks. He pressed something into my hand, his old pocket watch, the silver worn smooth at the edges. "This," he said quietly, "always ticks steady through every storm. When people don't listen, listen to yourself. That's the only rhythm you can trust." His words settled deep in my bones, though I didn't yet know how much I would need them. The weeks stretched into months, and the signs became harder to ignore. Still, every time I tried to raise my voice, I was shut down. The family's obsession with appearances, Sunday luncheons, polished lawns, polite gossip, was more important than the truth of a man they claimed to honor. The last time I asked about his health, my mother's voice was ice. "Drop it, Claire. If you keep making trouble, you'll find yourself outside this family faster than you think." That night, clutching the pocket watch in my palm, I made a quiet vow. If they wouldn't face the truth, I would. And if that meant standing alone, then so be it. Leaving home wasn't a grand rebellion. It was quiet, almost invisible, one suitcase, a bus ticket, and a trembling hand clutching Grandpa's pocket watch in my coat pocket. I remember the hum of the Greyhound as it rolled away from the familiar streets of Ohio, carrying me toward a city where nobody knew my name. New York was cruel at first. The apartment I rented was barely larger than a closet, with peeling paint and a radiator that clanged like a broken bell all night. I worked double shifts at a diner, pouring coffee for strangers who never remembered my face. Some nights, when I got home past midnight, My hands would shake so badly from exhaustion that I'd spill water trying to fill a glass. Still, I kept going. Because every tick of that pocket watch reminded me of Grandpa's words. Listen to yourself. My break came in the unlikeliest of places, the diner itself. A woman named Margaret sat at the counter every Friday, dressed in tailored suits, always reading financial reports between bites of blueberry pie. She watched me work for months before one evening, she slid a business card across the counter. "You've got grit," she said, her voice low and steady. "Ever thought about doing more than serving coffee?" I laughed at first, embarrassed. But Margaret wasn't joking. She ran a small consulting firm and needed an assistant. It wasn't glamorous. I fetched files, answered phones, and stayed late organizing endless spreadsheets, but she treated me like I mattered. She didn't flinch when I made mistakes. Instead, she taught me. Under her mentorship, I learned to read contracts, draft proposals, and navigate rooms full of men who underestimated me before I even spoke. I studied at night, taking online courses, my laptop balanced on the wobbly kitchen table I'd bought secondhand. Some mornings, I'd look in the mirror before work, my eyes rimmed red with fatigue, and whisper, "You're not going back. Not ever." The small victories were my fuel. My first solo presentation, my first paycheck big enough to cover rent without panic, the first time a client asked me for advice instead of Margaret. I still remember the rush of buying my own modest apartment, a one-bedroom with creaky wooden floors and a window that caught the morning sun. I stood in that empty space, holding Grandpa's watch, and promised myself, I'll build a life on truth, not illusions. My family, of course, knew none of this. On the rare occasions I answered their calls, I kept my answers vague. "I'm fine. Work is steady. Nothing exciting." I posted photos of sunsets, not offices. Coffee mugs, not contracts. Let them believe I was scraping by. It was safer that way. Years rolled on, and the woman they had dismissed as too dramatic, too emotional, too naive, became someone they wouldn't recognize. I rose through the ranks until one morning, I wasn't just an assistant anymore. I was the one signing contracts, the one leading teams, the one whose name appeared on the door of a glass-walled office overlooking the skyline. Still, I carried the same pocket watch in my bag. Its steady ticking reminded me, no matter how far I climbed, the truth mattered more than appearances. And someday, I knew, that truth would come face to face with my family's carefully constructed lies. Back in that glittering banquet hall, my husband's whisper wouldn't leave me. "He's long gone." The words crawled under my skin, heavy as lead, louder than the quartet playing Strauss in the corner. I scanned the room, the cousins with their perfect smiles, my uncle's booming laugh, my mother's eyes glittering like ice. The chair at the head of the table sat a little too far back from the spotlight, draped with decorations, but conspicuously empty. I leaned closer to my husband. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened. "Claire, he passed away 2 years ago. They've staged this, everything, so the estate stays under their control. Look around. Where is he?" The words landed like a knife. My heart lurched, and still I forced my lips into another polite smile as my mother tapped her glass for silence. She raised her champagne flute high, her voice steady, commanding the room. To my father, 92 years young, and still the pillar of this family. Applause thundered. Glasses clinked. My throat burned with bile. I waited until the last laugh faded before stepping forward, heels clicking against marble, each step pulling the rug tighter beneath their feet. I felt the weight of eyes turning, confusion fluttering like moths around the chandeliers. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to slice through the air. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother blinked once, her face composed, then tilted her chin. "He's resting." "He's tired." "Resting." I let out a hollow laugh. "He's not here. He hasn't been here in years, has he?" Whispers rippled across the room. My uncle shifted uncomfortably, setting down his drink. A cousin coughed. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the pocket watch. The silver gleamed under the chandelier. I held it up, my hand steady. "He gave me this when I was 15. He told me to listen to the rhythm of truth, not the noise around me. I listened, and it led me here. My husband stepped closer, his presence solid behind me. "Claire," he said softly, "show them." So I did. I opened the leather folder I'd carried in, the one I hadn't planned to reveal tonight. Inside were documents, death certificates, property records, proof of accounts shifted and forged. My career had given me access, skills, and connections my family never imagined I had. Gasps echoed. My mother's face drained of color. "You staged this entire charade," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "You lied about his life, his death, and his legacy. You thought I was still the girl you could silence. But I am not that girl anymore." The room seemed to contract around us. No one moved. No one breathed. My uncle muttered, "This is nonsense," but his voice lacked conviction. I stepped forward, lowering the watch into my palm, letting its ticking fill the silence. I built my own life away from this. I built it on honesty, hard work, and truth. While you were busy staging parties, I was building companies. While you silenced me, I was learning to speak louder than your lies. I saw the disbelief crash across their faces. They hadn't known. They still pictured me in that dingy apartment, scraping by, waiting for their approval. They hadn't imagined the office overlooking the skyline, the contract signed in my name, the people who looked to me for leadership. The weight of the reveal settled like a storm over the hall. Shame flickered in my mother's eyes, guilt in my uncle's, fear in my cousin's. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking. I stood taller. I let them see me, because the truth was no longer their enemy. It was mine to wield. The silence in the banquet hall stretched so long it became deafening. My mother finally broke it, her voice trembling just enough to betray the steel mask she wore. "Claire, you don't understand. We did what we had to do to keep this family together." I tilted my head, studying her. Together? Or controlled? Her lips pressed tight. My uncle muttered something about protecting the estate. My cousins shifted uneasily, eyes darting anywhere but at me. For once, I held every ounce of power in the room, and they knew it. I set the pocket watch gently on the table in front of me. Its ticking was almost imperceptible, but I heard it, steady and sure. I took a deep breath. "You want my silence? My cooperation? Then here are my terms." My mother flinched, as if I'd struck her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word landed heavier than the last. "First, the truth. You will acknowledge that Grandpa passed away. No more stage celebrations, no more forged signatures, no more rewriting reality. He deserves honesty, even in death." My uncle shifted in his chair, color rising in his cheeks. "Second," I continued, "the estate will no longer be managed in secret. Every document, every account, every decision will be transparent. I'll have oversight. If not, I walk, and I take everything I know public." Gasps circled the room. I could almost hear the panic rattling in their chests. "Third," I said softer now, "you will stop silencing each other. Stop pretending, stop posturing. If you want this family to survive, you will confront the truth, not bury it under champagne toasts and chandeliers." My mother's eyes glistened, though she tried to mask it with another practiced smile. "You're asking us to dismantle everything we've built." "No," I replied. "I'm asking you to rebuild it, but honestly this time. Or you'll lose more than the illusion you've been clinging to." I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. My cousins, once smug, now seemed small. My uncle leaned back, defeated. For the first time in my life, they weren't dictating the terms. I was. "And finally," I said, my voice gentler than I expected, "each of you needs to face what you've been avoiding. My uncle, put down the bourbon and face your grief. My cousins, stop chasing approval and start building lives of your own. And you, mother, stop hiding behind appearances. Be the woman you pretend to be in public. That's the only way any of us can move forward." The weight of my words hung between us. I didn't spit them with vengeance. I laid them down with quiet finality, like a contract ready for signatures. My husband slipped his hand into mine, steady, warm. I saw pride in his eyes, the kind that said, "This is who you are meant to be." For once, the balance of power wasn't tipped against me. It was mine to hold, and I wasn't handing it back. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. No more staged gatherings, no champagne toasts masking silence. Instead, there were awkward phone calls, short visits, and long pauses where words used to be swallowed. For once, truth was heavy in the air, but it was real. My uncle entered rehab. I didn't believe it at first, but one night he called me, his voice hoarse, thanking me for forcing him to look in the mirror. My cousins began pursuing lives beyond the family shadow. One went back to school, another started a small business. They stumbled, but at least they were moving. My mother was the hardest. She resisted, clung to her gowns, her polished image, her carefully curated perfection. But I saw her soften in fragments, the way she once showed up at my office unannounced, standing in the glass doorway, whispering, "It's beautiful, Claire. You did this on your own." The words trembled, but they were hers. In the stillness of my apartment, with the city glowing outside the window, I often found myself holding Grandpa's pocket watch. Its steady ticking filled the silence, like his voice once had. The silver edges were worn smooth now, warm against my palm. He had told me, "Listen to yourself. That's the only rhythm you can trust." And I had. Through the noise, the doubt, the lies, I had listened. Sometimes I pictured him in that porch swing, the evening sun sinking low, smiling at me the way he always did. I liked to think he would be proud, not just of what I had achieved, but of the fact that I had chosen truth over illusion. For the first time in years, the weight of secrecy was gone. In its place was something sturdier, quieter, stronger. As I set the watch back on the table, its tick echoing in the night, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, "I am no longer the girl they silenced. I am the woman who made them listen."